We'll pick up where we left off last week in the late great planet Earth. Still a very vibrant book. Still very, it did not age. It's aged very well, I'll put it that way. And so we're in chapter 5 on the invasion, the coming invasion of Russia into Israel, Russia and allies. And I just want to pick up one verse where we left off last week. It is 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 20. He says, "But know this first of all, that no prophecy of Scripture is a matter of one's own interpretation." And verse 21 says, "For no prophecy was ever made by an act of human will, but men moved by the Holy Spirit spoke from God." So, that being said, that is a verse that says this is literal. Do a literal interpretation of the Word of God. And don't spiritualize or take things away or add to it to make it say something it doesn't say. What does it say? It says this is going to happen. So I bring that up because he was very clear. Russia is specifically identified in chapter 38 and 39. Therefore, he's going in, and we'll look at verses 5 and 6 tonight. Let me read that to you, because these other countries are identified. Here. So, Ezekiel 38, verses 5 and 6. I'll start with verse 4 just to kind of give a context here. "And I will turn you about and put hooks in your jaws, and I will bring you out and all your army, horses and horsemen, all of them splendidly attired, a great company with buckler and shield, and all of them wielding swords. Persia, Ethiopia, and Put with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and all of its troops. Beth Togarmah from the remote parts of the north with all of its troops. Many peoples with you." All right, so we're going to dwell on that tonight and identify those. So Late Great Planet Earth identifies these, as do other books. And Hal Lindsey in 1970, I think, really opened the eyes of a lot of people by breaking this open and identifying this stuff. And of course, I didn't read that book when it came out, but a couple years later, I was probably 13, 14, and I read the book, and it was like, wow, so it's been that long in my life that I've been interested in that, and I think the Lord puts that on you. So this map here identifies these areas, and Moscow, Russia here, and straight down, we're going to look at Ukraine is even identified in here, and we'll look at that tonight too. But Gomer is Germany, Persia is Iran, Togarmah is Armenia, and really Turkey. It's that area there. Cush in Ethiopia, Put is Somalia. Well, all of these areas, this northern and eastern area of Africa here, those are all heavily Islamic now, right? Europe has been increasingly Islamic with immigrants coming in there, and all of these countries surrounding here. So what is different about Late Great Planet Earth, what it said then were these countries were increasingly communist, right? Well, 50 years later, yeah, they may be, but what there really is here is they're really Islamic, and that is this old thing against Israel. This is that opposition that they've always had, and Jonathan Cahn brings that up in the Dragon's Prophecy, that all of the enemies of Israel, as Israel rose back up and became a nation in 1948, Israel's enemies then also rose back up, and so Satan has this opposition always to try to take Israel out. And so when you see this, and I love using this, when you see Israel here, what this is not the entire world against Israel, but this moment in Ezekiel 38 and 39, this is going to be this group of countries led by Russia, all right? And like we talked about last week, Russia is the one country, and it was Soviet Union, the united group of them, but Russia itself it set itself up to be atheistic. In other words, they weren't going to believe in any God. They wanted to be their own end all, right? Well, God has something to say about that, because God's never going to be ignored. And so part of God bringing them together with these other countries and going to put hooks in their jaws is to prove to them, and then ultimately to Israel, that God is real, and He's not going to be ignored, right? So we read that. I won't rehash that this week, but we'll look at it again in the next couple of weeks. So with that, you've got all of these countries. So we're going to look at kind of how they're connected and how you can prove it, right? So that's what Hal Lindsey does in this chapter. He goes back through historically and proves it. So with that, Persia is Iran, and he said basically all authorities agree on who Persia is today. It is modern Iran. This is significant because it is being wooed by the United Arab Republic in its hostility against Israel. Well, that was 50 years ago. They don't have to be wooed now, right? I mean, this is, so in the last 6 months, right? Iran launched missiles at Israel back in April, I think this is the first time, and now this has been going back for 6 months. So with it, this thing that is going to happen, these are the coming together of it, if you want to call it that, because you've got all this stuff happening around it. He says this: the Russians are at this moment seeking to gain footholds in Iran by various overtures of aid in order to mount the large-scale invasion predicted in Ezekiel. Russia would need Iran as an ally. Well, Iran needs Russia as an ally. And what have we seen in the last, since they've invaded Ukraine, is that these two have been working together. The Russians have been using Iranian drones, right? And the Russians sold or something, they brought missiles into Iran here in the last 6 months. So, I mean, there's been a lot happening in 2024. If somebody's watching this video sometime down the line, this is October of 2024, and in the last 6 months, those two have been really working together with each other a lot. And so it is amazing to see that a prophecy given 2,500 years ago is so accurate today. That these nations would come together the way they have come together, and literally forming an alliance. Thoughts? Any of that?
For watching the hook develop.
Yeah. Well, to that point, this is an article Ray sent me. It says, Turkey asks Russia, Syria, and Iran to unite against Israel. I'll just read you a couple pieces of this here. Turkish President Erdogan told local media on Saturday that Russia, Iran, and Syria should do more to protect Syria's territorial integrity. It is essential that Russia, Iran, and Syria take more effective measures against the situation, which poses the greatest threat to Syria's territorial integrity, he said. Obviously, Iran and Syria are already working very closely together. We shall see what Russia and Turkey decide to do. The Russians definitely have their hands full with Ukraine, so they really don't have resources to spar for a war with the Middle East right now. So, why would God have to put hooks in their jaws? Because they've got their hands full in Ukraine. I'm just speculating here and theorizing a little bit, but it's not like they're going to want to, right? They're going to be forced to, because God's going to make that happen some way or shape or form, this alliance. Yes?
Doesn't Russia have a number of military bases, both land and naval bases in Syria?
I think they do. Yeah, they do. What? There was something about that, Alan. Maybe a year ago there was some talk about that.
And barrel bombs or something.
But yeah, I believe that's correct. So I just bring that up that Iran seems to be the biggest piece of this, right? And here in the last 2 days, someone in the United States Pentagon or somewhere released some inside information that Israel was going to do some type of surprise attack to Iran. Well, it's not going to be a surprise now, And in that sense, we are working against Israel. And I go back to Genesis 12. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. And it is not good, whatever the United States has done in opposition to Israel, that is not going to be good for us in the long run here. So anyway, Iran is kind of part and parcel, and they are listed first, in this list of nations.
Wonder how Russia's going to get pulled down there to fight them, and yet you take all the aid that Russia is getting because it's fighting, and they just had on the news where how many thousand troops from North Korea just went over there.
Right.
It's going to be. I got to do it. The news commentator said that this just goes to show how weak Russia has gotten, that they have to get help from all these people. They're going to get help from all these people, and then all these people are just going to say, come on, you're going with us.
Right.
You don't have a choice. You've got to go with us. And so I think that's what's going to happen.
A hook in the jaw, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Russia's right next door to Ukraine. Ukraine's about the size of Texas.
Yeah.
And is Russia really a threat to us? They can't even take over Ukraine in all this time?
Right.
The difference being there, Steve, that if it was us, there'd already be nuclear missiles in the air. For whatever reason, Putin isn't using them. Yeah, I think the reason being that he's afraid of what's going to happen if he uses one.
Yeah.
The retaliation. Israel has a nuclear weapon. They got everything. All the weapons we've ever given them, what have they done? They've taken the weapons we gave them and made them better.
Yeah.
Blow up cell phones.
Yeah, they got the upgraded beepers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
exactly.
That's right.
I just saw on the news too where Iran is apparently getting a little worried because they have convinced all the countries around them that Israel cannot use their air or land space.
Right.
They can't fly over to get to Iran. They've come to some kind of an agreement with all the nations around them. I just saw that on the news.
Yeah. So things are getting increasingly tense
Yes.
in this whole thing over there. In the meantime, we have an election that if it goes one way or another, we'll either be very supportive of Israel, or we're going to be increasingly less supportive of Israel.
Non-committal.
Was that
Non-committal.
right?
Or we've already been weakened these last 4 years. Another 4 years, we won't be anything.
Right.
I had another thought too, if when all these nations actually come together to try and destroy Israel, that's huge.
Yeah.
What's America going to do? Jump right in the middle of that? I don't think so.
No, and we'll talk about it next week. But later in the passage there, it says there's lists a couple of nations that say, "What are you doing?" Right? And
Right.
there is a link that some people say that might be the one connection you would find the United States, but technically it is Great Britain. They link it to that, which essentially then you could say, well, America was founded by Great Britain in one way, shape, or form. It might be a little bit of a stretch, but that was the one area people will say that. But that's there'll be those who are saying, "Wow,
I think
what are you doing?"
I think they were saying that before we've become so weak.
Yeah,
Because now we're just. Do we have any effect at all?
no, not
They're not afraid of us.
so. Well, yes, it is crazy how quickly things are happening,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I've got a question.
Yeah.
At this point, were they mentioning like every people group that they knew of that was like a global power? All like every nation that was known to Israel were like all on this list, those were their epicenters?
I don't know the answer to that directly. I think these are nations that have been identified that would definitely be enemies of, and prior to this rise of Islam, in those nations, there wouldn't necessarily be a direct connect, right? Other than maybe they just were friends of friends, right? And you come together like that. So I don't know, Rusty, to answer your question directly on
Well,
that.
I mean, like at the time of Ezekiel.
Right.
Uh, was this a laundry list of all the major world powers, or is this like just specific ones?
I think it's just specific ones. I'll do a little bit digging deeper as we go into it, because Things to Come has got a couple good passages in it, as does Dr. Unger in his commentary.
These are people that actually moved into these areas and would become these nations, right?
Right.
Like the names of these groups.
Yeah.
Like even all the way back into Genesis, you pick up on these names, and this family or group went to these areas and lived there, and that became that nation.
Yes.
That's how this developed. Is that?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, as opposed to like national borders like we think of today,
Oh, okay.
it was, kingdoms that are all kind of built as branches of each other, kind of
Right.
associated loosely together, or, they have an epicenter of the civilization basically, and it kind of branches out.
Right.
Was this a laundry list, or were they intentionally leaving some of them off? Where, like you mentioned, Egypt wasn't specifically mentioned.
Right.
Saudi Arabia, or there was likely a large population living in that area that wasn't specifically mentioned, or India, for example.
Right.
I don't know if, like at that time, they were communicating that far, or if it was just, this region was everyone that they knew
Yeah.
around the world or something.
I'll dig into that. So when we get into it next week, because I'm going to go to the book Things to Come next week, and then I'll add in some of Dr. Unger's commentary out of that too, and try to find that out, see if there's any kind of connection then to now. Yeah, for sure. But Ray made a good point here. So like Ethiopia, so one of the things in Late Great Planet Earth he does is go back to Genesis and connect these people to there. So Ethiopia, or Cush, is the black African nations. Ethiopia is a translation of the Hebrew word Cush. Cush was the first son of Ham, one of the sons of Noah. So Moses Genesis mentions the land of Cush in Genesis 2:13, which was originally adjacent to an area near the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. And then after examining authorities on the subject, Genesius is recognized as one of the great scholars of history, and he summarized it this way: the Cushites were the black race people. They migrated first into the Arabian Peninsula and then across the Red Sea to the area south of Egypt, and that they are descendants of Cush. And Genesis 10:7 says the nation sprung from Cush and are basically they immigrated down into Africa. So that was that area. So Ethiopia is mentioned, translated, Cush is translated Ethiopian 21 times. And just some highlights here. So yeah, that was kind of the connection point there. So
If the population at the time when this was being laid out, to know that these countries or whatever are there, it wouldn't be that hard for them to communicate, because it seems as though, like you say, that Ethiopia's here, and then the grandson of went over here, and then somebody down here and their nephew went there, and all that. These people are basically all related,
yeah,
and they all come back together.
Yeah.
It's not like so much Russia and all the things like that. It's the family,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They come together against common foe,
Right.
if you want to put it that
Well,
way.
now that you say that, I was just sitting here thinking when you're talking, 2,500 years ago, when this was prophesied, it would have been really tough to put that alliance together because those countries aren't connected physically, So how, Russia's way up north and Ethiopia's way down south, and how would that come together? And so it is kind of interesting that now, in our time, it's like super easy to come together this way. So
Do you think maybe they're just all related? I mean, after not like brothers and sisters, but eventually they all. When these people spread out, I mean, the population of the whole earth was not that much,
right?
And when somebody went north, I don't know. I can't figure out.
I'll tell you who's got a great breakdown of that is Answers in Genesis from the three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and then how they spread
the got stuff because
right?
it lost me about 3 generations, and I don't know who we got it.
Well, right, and so some of them went north, some of them went south, and some of them through the Middle East and Israel, and then so it is a really good way to see how did that happen after the flood. Where did they go, and how did the various peoples get to where they're at? So did you?
You're talking about Ken Ham?
Yeah, Ken Ham.
Yeah, that's Ken Ham and Answers in Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
They have really good literature on that.
And they have a big display that follows everybody. If you go to the Ark, you should go to the Ark. It's awesome.
It is really cool.
We've spoken about that. We talked about a lot of things.
So Libya is listed here. Libya is the translation of the word Put. And Put was the third son of Ham in Genesis 10:6. His descendants migrated to the west of Egypt and became the source of the North African Arab nations, such as Libya, Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco. Put is Libya, and that just the connections there, showing that kind of where they all went. Gomer and its hordes is the Iron Curtain countries, he says. So Gomer is the eldest son of Japheth, right? Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So Gomer was not the guy on Andy Griffith. Gomer was the eldest son of Japheth and the father of Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. And these people make up the extremely northern part of up in here, Europe. And so Germany is very much part of this. So you can probably think, a little bit here, the picture had not been unfolding very much in World War II. But when Germany rose up in World War I, World War II, people would think, man, and Hitler was the Antichrist, so because you could see pieces of this in the scripture, and you go, wow, that's what this is. But now, 100 years later, which is hard to believe, you talk about World War I and World War II, and you're 100 years removed from that. But see where we are, and you would have thought, well, Germany was done for, that we pretty much defeated them, and we defeated Japan. But Germany has now, it's not what it was, but it has come back up, and they're one. And if they connect here, they talk about NATO and these NATO countries, but 8 years ago or so, when we had our little row with the NATO countries and said, well, Germany, you're selling natural gas to Russia, but you aren't paying into NATO, right? And everybody goes, well, I didn't know that was happening. So these alliances that were made, NATO was supposed to be, we're hanging together no matter what, and underneath, we're not hanging together. So you just see that part of it came unraveled, and what was really happening is this is happening, and Gomer and all of its hordes. So who else is in with them on there? Well, there may be several of them because, again, what has changed? Well, it's Islam. It's heavily Islamic influence, and Islam is this foe, this enemy of Israel, and they want to wipe him off the map. So it's going to be this. It's probably not going to be very hard, and there's probably a few more things that need to happen along the way that are going to bring that together, and they're going to jump in, fully in this thing too.
And something you said is so important. It's so important to know all of the prophecy because, like you said, in World War II, they thought Hitler was the Antichrist.
Right.
But Israel wasn't a nation yet.
Yes.
So you have to watch, like Watchmen, okay?
Yeah.
Put all the pieces together and kind of see what time is it, where are we at,
Right.
and that's why now, wow, the pieces are really coming together. It's not there yet, but boy, it's coming fast.
And
Scariest part about it is this generation shall not pass away.
I
Mhm.
know.
You know.
How
That
long is a
means-
generation?
That means close.
How long is a generation?
Well, I'm hoping he was thinking in Methuselah was.
Oh, Mike, for such a time as this.
Because 1948, that was a long time ago.
Yes, it was.
70 years, we're already past that.
Do
Yep.
they mean
Or
when
we're right
Israel
at the
became
door.
a nation, or do they mean when we recognize the capital of Jerusalem? That's the
That's
other
a good
question.
point.
I've heard both.
What?
Yeah.
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 It could be that this generation will not pass away. It could be the generation that saw Israel become a nation, or the one that saw the Jerusalem become the capital again.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
And that hasn't been very long.
Well,
No,
50,
that's,
1967,
Trump
so 57 years.
Since when?
67.
Since,
Since then.
When Israel got Jerusalem back,
okay. They
it was
just,
67.
yeah, okay, 67.
Right.
We
Because
wasn't
Trump-
recognized till
Yeah.
And in
17.
40 years is a
Was-
We didn't recognize it.
We didn't recognize it, but the world isn't going to recognize it,
No.
right? So in that, and Con, which book was it? I can't remember. One of the ones you had read, and he talks about
Just like a manifesto.
that one. What was the one before that? Anyway, the it starts with an O. The
Oh, the
Oh,
Oracle.
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 It's the Oracle. Talks about that. That's so they had their nation, but they didn't have Jerusalem. And in the War of '67, in June of '67, they've
Yeah.
got Jerusalem back.
Part of it.
And
They don't have
Yeah,
the
part of they don't have all of it, but the Old Testament shows that it's always going to be in contention. Jerusalem's going to be in contention. Israel's going to be in contention till Messiah comes back.
Right.
So, yeah, we recognized it. The world has not recognized it
Yeah.
necessarily, and so there's that. I've heard that both ways. So, and that goes back 50 years. I remember teaching about it, and I think maybe Ray, you even talked about it back in
Yeah.
the day too. So yeah, so what is a generation? I don't know. Jesus said, "Be ready." So that's all I know. Just be ready. And then if it's in your time, you're ready. Togarma and all of its hordes is southern Russia and the Cossacks. And I'm going, I've never heard of the Cossacks. You know where the Cossacks is? See right there? That's Ukraine. This is the center part of Ukraine. And Ukraine's in contention now. So somehow or other, this gets dragged into there. Right? So, and that's what was eye-opening when they went into Ukraine back at that time. 2.5 years ago? It's like, whoa, they're moving south. What's happening here? So this is Togarma, all that area, Turkey, and all of that area right in through there. Because remember, he's talking about, and Rusty, to your point, he's listing the prophecy is against these peoples that kind of populated. Well, it might not be just one nation. It might be a group of nations that kind of make up those peoples, right? So it could be, the peoples more than the nations in what is coming against it. And I'm thinking about that as I'm talking. I better be careful, but you know what I'm saying. It's it could be that too. But the fact that that's kind of the central piece of Ukraine, and that kind of ties in with that whole thing, and we know what's going on there. Something happens to draw Russia into this. Something happens to pull them down. So, yeah.
It'd be interesting because Germany and a number of NATO countries are supplying large amount of military hardware to Ukraine. Not just rifles, Germany is providing some of their best tanks.
Right.
Question. Right now, Jordan is, I believe they're on good footings with Israel.
Yeah, I think so, by
Yeah.
and large.
They've got kind of a neutral project going with the Dead Sea as far as fertilizer and whatever. But Israel supplies most of Jordan's water.
Yes, they do.
So without water, I just wonder what would happen if they...
Well, Jordan River is about to dry up. I mean, it looks like a creek, and a muddy creek at that.
Really?
And when they baptize people, they're almost in the middle, and they're waist deep. But that's where they're getting their water, and that's what they're using for all this irrigation.
They're taking water from the Mediterranean, and the Israelis are desaling it, and they give it to Jordan.
We got to see 2 huge plants, desalinization plants there on the Mediterranean. And I don't know what they're doing with the Dead Sea, but they're mining the Dead Sea.
The southern end of it.
What is it? Salt?
I don't know.
Is that all they want?
They got salts and minerals. And
Okay.
everything, but there's a large part of the southern part of the Dead Sea.
You can't go there. They don't let tourists go there.
Jordan, when Iran sent all those missiles across, they helped shoot some of those down.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Jordan helped shoot some of them down.
Stand up for Israel.
So those nations, and then the final piece of this is that many people are with you. So there's this rise up, right? There's this rising. There's this group here, and something's going to come about. So Israel is on the offensive now, right? And you wonder if, and this is total, just thinking out loud, right? You wonder if, because Israel's on the offensive and they're taking out their enemies, if they realize we're not going to get them alone, we're going to have to come together. Something pulls this in for them, because Israel just got another new leader of Hezbollah.
Yeah.
Right?
They don't
It's like
last
the
long.
fourth. No, they're going to get to the point where they don't want to volunteer for that job. But and that's just been in the last couple of days.
Yeah.
So Israel's really moving forward on this stuff, and you just wonder if somehow or other this conglomeration of nations and this alliance is going to come together, because they know no one of us individually is going to take them out. We're going to have to do this together. And then God puts an end to all of it.
Is there any indication any place that this thing could become nuclear? The reason I say that is that definitely, if that would happen, the U.S. and some other countries say, whoa, we're not getting involved in that.
Right.
It just crossed my mind. They talk about cleansing the land later on, burying all the bodies, and so is that a spiritual aspect, or is that for another reason? This is just a question.
Yeah.
I'm thinking out loud here.
Yeah. So in that defeat of Russia itself, I don't think Israel fires a shot. I think this is God taking them out. Now, what happens before that,
the
right?
intention, could it be that it's, and I mean, look how small Israel is.
Right.
How many nuclear bombs would it take to just completely destroy it, and nobody be able to live there again?
Right.
So, I mean, I can just see God saying, this isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if there was that anyhow.
Yeah,
That's just me running wild.
I don't know, but what's interesting is now, to this point, with what we have seen in the past and where we're at right now, it's some of this conjecture isn't that far outside the box. I don't feel.
And back when World War II was beginning, nobody thought it was going to be a world war.
Well,
Right.
And all of a sudden, bang, this could be the same
Yeah.
scenario.
Yeah.
You know, everybody talks about it, but yeah, right, well, bingo,
Yeah.
something's going to happen.
And ultimately, it plays into God's plan for the end. And
Yes.
what is the centerpiece of God's plan for the end? Israel, Jerusalem, and Messiah.
Right.
And so that's what this is all about. It's about Israel. It's about Jerusalem. It is about the coming of Messiah, the coming of Jesus Christ, which, as His people, should give us joy to know that this is going to happen. Now, that sounds goofy to say, oh, all these terrible things are going to happen and we should have joy. I think we have joy in knowing that God is in control. We have joy in knowing that we know the outcome. And the other thing, and I'll reiterate this, is that, this war does not happen. This invasion doesn't happen with the church still on the planet. So, which, there again, is the clock is ticking, and it should move us to action, to share, to be the watchmen in our time, to tell our friends and tell our families and neighbors and whoever that we meet, you need to be ready. Are you ready? You need to be ready. Because again, looking at this, it's not that far-fetched to go in the middle of the Bible and read that to somebody who's never read it and say, see how close we are. It could very well happen that way. So very soon. So anyway, that is really the essence of what is in Late Great Planet Earth, and I like this as a great reference point, a quick way to study this. Any other thoughts, questions?